Hello and welcome to In the Green. Today we're coming to you from our new studios in southwestern Farmington Hills, and it's a pleasure to be here. We have a special guest today, Mr. Randym Jones. Randym, welcome.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks a lot for coming here and being on In the Green.
Sure.
The reason I had asked you to come is that I heard from Craig Harvey, actually, that you were one of the people who went way back in the history of the green movement here in Michigan, at least in the recent green movement. And I wanted to document some of that. So,
okay.
But first, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you're from Ann Arbor, and
actually not.
Okay, I don't know that.
Okay.
Can we cut that? No, please go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'm from Michigan. My parents are from Michigan. My grandparents are from Michigan. I grew up in the Lansing area, and moved to Ann Arbor in 1986. I first joined the Greens.
He's been to Ann Arbor.
I first joined the Greens in 1993. Dana Cunningham took me to a meeting, and I've always been a sort of political animal. I was active with the Libertarians in the 80s in Lansing, but I found the Greens a much more hospitable place.
Okay, great. So you don't live in Ann Arbor, though. Are you a member of a local green organization?
Oh, sure. I'm a member of the Huron Valley Greens.
Okay, and where do they meet?
When?
Where?
Oh, they meet in the Michigan League on the second.
In Ann Arbor.
In Ann Arbor.
Oh, okay.
On the University
I'm
of Michigan
just
campus.
trying to reestablish the Ann Arbor connection there, but that's great. You are chairman of the platform committee, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And
yes.
I'd like to talk about the platform of the Greens and how it is and how it got there and where it's going. Is it a complete document, complete item? Now, you've given me a copy of the platform. And
well, we've worked on this particular version of the platform for about 2 years. The history of this particular version of the platform is that we started in January 1999 up at Neotawanta Inn in Traverse City. We had a quarterly meeting up there. Jim Nisita, whom you probably know.
Yes. We'll have to have Jim on the show.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Jim said that we should have a new platform. I'd written a platform for the Greens that was adopted at the summer 1997 meeting. It was much shorter than this. But Jim felt we should have another one for the next century. And so we started out working there. We had a committee of about 5 people and just sort of went at it. It was originally chaired by Meryl Hodneyfield, and she chaired it for the committee for about a year. And during that time, before she had to leave due to a family situation, she put together basically an outline, as it were, of the platform, which listed the various planks that might be in it. And the committee was able to collect about half of those planks.
To collect about half of those?
Oh, sure. A unique thing about our platform is it's actually written by Greens across the state. There are about 40. There's contributions from about 40 different Greens in here. It's unlike the Democratic or Republican process where they have 10 people in a room and it's all kind of secret, and then they rush it out and they rubber stamp it at the convention.
And it's top down, more or less. Right.
Yes. What's the Greens? It was bottom up.
And in the Greens, anyone can submit a proposed plank for the platform,
that's correct.
Right? And so this platform was just recently adopted, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right. We adopted it at our winter quarterly meeting, which was held in Kalamazoo on the 5th of February.
2001.
2001, yes.
Okay. And there were, do you know roughly how many planks were submitted, and did they all pass?
Altogether, there are about 84 planks, including introductions and stuff. Of those, about 85% were accepted by the convention. And
the ones that didn't draws our interest. Why do you think particular planks weren't adopted? Is it that those issues were not favorable to the Greens generally, or things still need to be worked out?
I think it was the case that things basically need to be worked out. What I heard at the convention was people felt that certain planks were a little skimpy, and so they rejected it on that basis. They wanted to see more in there. Now, this particular version is about a third the size of where it was about a year ago, because it got really big, and then someone had to go in and chop it down to size.
Right, because a platform is kind of a mission statement and where the
yes, it is.
Where the party stands and where they intend to go. That's interesting. Do you think you might ever run for office? And have you ever run for office? I don't know.
I've certainly been approached numerous times. I don't know if I'm really charismatic enough to run for office, but it's a possibility.
Well, we think you're plenty charismatic, and we'll see what our audience thinks. Maybe they can send in to the MI Greens website and say what they think about Randym as a potential candidate. That would be great. It's migreens.org. But Randym, I would encourage you to run. I know that the Greens need a lot of people.
Yes, that's true.
And you're very knowledgeable and well thought, and that's great. Are there any particular issues you'd like to talk about in the platform? Do you have any favorite or pet issues, if you will?
Well, I'm perhaps too close to the platform to be able to say anything about it, except that it's a great platform.
That's good.
As you know, the Greens have always been very interested in the environment, and so there are a good part of the platform deals with the environment and ecological issues here in Michigan. Things like waste dumping, for example. Some Greens are active against the waste being brought in from Toronto to Sumter Township, for example.
Absolutely. There's lots of Canadian waste coming in now, and it's beginning to be a pretty large issue.
Right, and it's largely due to the legislature has simply not bothered to put up any barriers to that sort of thing. Other issues are, for example, the proposed drilling under Lake Michigan for oil and gas, which is opposed basically by everyone except the Republicans.
And the oil drillers.
Oh, and the oil drillers, of course. Issues of...
What about guns? Does the platform address the issue of guns? People always ask me about that.
Yes, we had quite a long and rather heated discussion around the guns plank. In fact, probably 50% of what we talked about was that. And there seem to be two camps of thought about that here in Michigan. There are people who feel that because guns are in the Constitution, then people should have right to guns. And then there are people who feel that, because guns have such deadly potential that it should be limited in terms of what people are allowed to own guns and situations like that.
Those things aren't necessarily inconsistent.
That's right? True. That's true. As a matter of fact, the plank we finally did come up with, which was one of the ones that was accepted, said basically that as Greens, we're Americans, we respect the Constitution. It's in the Constitution, but we have great concerns about the safety issues. So we suggested selling trigger locks with each guns, making sure guns are kept out of the reach of children. Very commonsensical sorts of things.
Right. We're seeing from most of the school shootings. It's unfortunate we have to call them that, the genre of that tragedy. But those school shootings, those guns seem to all be coming from parents. Or many of them, or from parents of friends, but they're guns that are in households.
Yes, and so someone on one list pointed out an interesting point to me. They said, well, you realize that all these school shootings have taken place in states with the death penalty. I was like, oh, that's odd. And now, as you know, Michigan doesn't have a death penalty. And in fact, in the platform, we make a point of saying that we don't have a death penalty, and we don't want a death penalty. We feel that it's a form of vengeance that doesn't really cause anyone to not carry out the various things that they might do otherwise.
Has no deterrent effect.
Yes, exactly.
Right. That's great. The 10 key values of the Greens pretty well cover the whole gamut and range of social issues, environmental issues, electoral issues, all of those things, wouldn't you say? Is the platform a fleshing out of those 10 key values?
Pretty much. Personally, what I find lacking in the 10 key values is very much of a discussion of economics. There's a lot of addressing of social issues, which is very important. But from my perspective, the Greens really need to think about economic issues, bread and butter issues, as it were, pocketbook issues, because that's what people are really interested in. Currently,
in our economic times, one of the big issues, and one of my big issues, has always been paying down the debt.
Yes.
And does the platform address that?
The platform is for basically Michigan issues, so it doesn't really address national issues. So it doesn't really address that directly.
It's a state platform, in other words.
Yes, yes.
And would you say the focus is on environmental issues? right now?
Not really. I think it covers, I think as you said, the platform pretty much fleshes out the 10 key values.
And there are a lot of electoral reform issues as a result of,
yes.
especially as a result of the recent election in 2000. And I know Jim Nacita has said that he's planning to work real hard and lead a petition drive for instant runoff voting, where people can vote their first, second, and third choices. Does the platform address some of those democracy issues, if you will?
Yes, it does. Grassroots democracy issues are very important to the Greens. One particular problem that we've seen in the political arena is that the elected legislatures and so on and so forth are very out of touch with the people. They're beholden to their campaign contributors, and they just don't really pay attention to what the people want. And that's, well, let me give you a little history here, okay?
Sure.
Back in 1980, Ronald Reagan was elected president, and at that point, the Democrats on a national level sort of got panicked and said, you know, we're falling behind. We have to get more money, to beat people like Ronald Reagan. So basically, they started turning into like junior Republicans, going out and trying to get some money into them. But in the process, they sort of lost touch with their constituency. And let's face it, the Republicans are much better at raising money than the Democrats are. So the Democrats are in an unusual situation here. They're sort of caught between their large contributors and their people base. And I think it's questionable if they'll really be able to survive, because they're kind of trying to talk out of both sides of their mouth at the same time, and people just aren't buying it.
Right. It's tearing the party apart, it looks like. And that's one of the reasons I'm a Green, and you're a Green, I guess. How many Greens are there now, do you know, in Michigan? And can one really say? I guess that's like asking how many Republicans there are, how many Democrats there are. And Michigan has always been a high ticket splitting state, with a high number of independent voters.
It is rather rough to say how many Greens there are, because the number changes every day upward. You know, every day there are more people come to the Greens, more people discover the Greens and say, wow, you know, these people believe what I believe. Now, I can tell you, in the state of Michigan, in the presidential election, Ralph Nader received approximately 83,000 votes. That's approximately 1,000 votes for every county in Michigan. In fact, curiously enough, you might find this interesting, the largest votes percentage-wise came out of certain counties in the Upper Peninsula, the ones that you went to. So it served to illustrate, of course.
I think it was Baraga County, and I'm not sure of the reason for that. I mean, I was in Baraga County for a couple of hours, but...
well, I think it simply proves that if people are exposed to the ideas of the Greens, they glom right onto them.
Well, that's true.
So you might have pointed a way to get people, you know, involved with the Greens simply by showing up. If we can go through all the different states and say, look, here we are, I think that will certainly increase our vote totals.
Absolutely. One of the big problems has been that spoiler effect, and with instant runoff voting, it would take that away. In the meantime, I know the Greens are having debates online about whether to run candidates for certain offices and who, of course, et cetera. Do you have any feelings about that, and do you want to express those?
One issue which we're debating right now is if there's a situation where there's an election and a Green is not running, should we or should we not endorse a candidate from another party or not? And right now there is no consensus in that. Some people feel that, well, if there's not a Green in there, then it's sort of open season, and other people feel that to endorse someone from another party risks making the Greens not look independent. So that really hasn't been settled yet.
Yeah, it's definitely a time of upheaval politically in the country, and the Greens are in the forefront of that. So it's an exciting time to
yes, it is.
To be in this situation. The water in Michigan is not getting any cleaner, I guess. Do the Greens have something in the state platform that addresses that? And I know you can't speak for the Greens, but you have your finger on the pulse, if you will, about how they're thinking.
Well, we have one line in the platform which I think sums it up. It says basically, quote, "Our right to clean water is non-negotiable," unquote. I mean, you know, how much more straightforward can that be?
That's pretty simple.
Yes. Yes.
And there's been a lot of exposure lately, especially with Bill Moyer's report about the chemical industry, and with Dow Chemical in Michigan, and some other companies, and a lot of the polluted waterways. And it seems that the state government is not doing anything to clean up the waterways. We're almost left to private litigation for lawyers like me to go out and do things like that. But on the other hand, they're limiting the availability of, through what they call tort reform, you know, the ability to sue and to recover. So the corporations are buying protection from that, basically.
Yes.
And it's,
you know, it's very ironic that when John Engler came into office, he renamed the Department of Natural Resources the Department of Environmental Quality. And because we've seen, it's just been really horrendous in Michigan. The EPA has had to come in and you know, stomp their foot down in Michigan and say, you're not keeping your air clean enough. You know, people are dying because your Department of Environmental Quality isn't doing its job. There's actually, just after the election, there was some talk of Russ Harding running the EPA, but I guess that was too much even for George Bush. Of course, we did get Spence Abraham as Energy Secretary, which is just about as good.
well, right, as you know, I ran against Spence Abraham, and I'm pretty opposed to his policies.
Oh, yeah.
And it would seem, if I were Energy Secretary, for what it's worth, we would be building windmills in Detroit, and we would be building solar panels in Detroit, and clean energy, and we would be recycling and cleaning up brownfields for real instead of building schools over polluted sites.
Or parks, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just incredible to me the immense waste of funds and of people's health.
Very true.
And that's not taken into account in environmental, well, when you're talking about burning coal or any type of energy. So that's really something. So are you ready to announce you're running for governor, or no? I'm pulling your leg, but I think you'd be an excellent governor, by the way.
Thank you.
What do you do for a career? What's your?
I'm basically a freelance web development person.
Okay.
Basically,
So
nowadays I know I'm unemployed, but I've been on the web for about 5 or 6 years now, pretty much since it sort of hit mass consciousness. So,
oh, okay. So you're a techie then,
Oh, yeah.
and you do a lot. You spend a lot of hours a day online.
not as much as I used to. I used to be on there quite a lot, and I've sort of pulled back a bit because it can be very addictive. You know, you get on there and you surf the web, and you get the listservs, and you look up and 5 hours have gone by.
That's really something. I take it you've been to the greenhouse, the.
No, I haven't yet, actually.
You haven't been over to the greenhouse.
I've certainly heard a lot about it. I think Tom Ness is doing some incredible stuff. You know, Tom is probably the reason we got on the ballot in the state of Michigan, because his infectious enthusiasm just energized everyone.
And well, there's a question about whether that's going to keep going. I think it will, but
I do too.
It's clearly up to people to do things. And one of the interesting things in dealing with the Greens, as having been involved with other political organizations, is that with the Greens being so decentralized and consensus-oriented, it's difficult for people to take leadership. It's not difficult for people to take leadership positions, but people don't really want to be out there as leaders. They want to be working together along with other people's interests, and sometimes that really slows things down. It's kind of a big blob moving along, if you will.
Yeah, well, I think part of it is because the Greens have a different concept of moving forward. We feel, as you know, that we can't have a situation where some people move ahead and everyone else gets left behind. You know, the traditional hierarchical structures of leadership just don't work in the Greens. Because the Greens do strive so much for consensus, what you get is not self-selected leaders so much as sort of consensus-selected leaders. People sort of settle on a person and say, no, this person can be a leader. But a funny thing about in the Greens, oftentimes people say, well, this person can be a leader, and the person will go, oh, I'm not a leader. But we've certainly seen many times situations rise and leaders have sort of appeared and led us forward, and then when their job was done, faded back into the pack, so to speak. And that seems to be the best way of doing things, because you get the people who lead it who really have the passion. That there's not a lot of infighting, not a lot of climbing on top of one another to be the leader. in fact, some people feel that's hard for some people to get into, especially many males, because they're like, who's the leader? Who's the leader? It's like, well, maybe there isn't a leader. Maybe you're the leader.
Right.
But that's good. By constantly recycling into leadership, in and out of leadership roles, people get experience, and yet no one gets a swelled head.
Right, that's true. And everybody gets a say in how things are done.
Yes.
And that's a lot of the point, too. Well, the Greens organize, any 3 people can form a Green local, right?
Yes.
And there are a lot more Green locals than there used to be.
Oh, yeah.
There used to be just one or a couple.
Yeah,
and
used to be one.
There was one, right?
Yeah, the Huron Valley Greens.
The group you're a member of.
Yes, that's right.
Back in the day, there were, well, you and Craig Harvey and Gaia Kyle and other people.
Let me give a little bit of the history behind the Greens in Michigan. Okay, the Greens came into the United States in 1984 and formed the Committees of Correspondence, patterned after the revolutionary Committees of Correspondence back in the 1750s. And in 1987, Greens in Michigan organized in Ann Arbor. And there was a group who got things together, and in about 1990, I would say they peaked in size. But then after that point, a lot of the Greens split off and became Detroit Summer, and then there was a slight decline in the number of Greens in Michigan. But then after about 1995, when Craig joined the group, there's been an upswing.
So you mentioned a couple of organizations. Detroit Summer was one. I hadn't heard of that, and I've lived in the Detroit area for quite a while.
My understanding, I wasn't around at the time, but my understanding is that it was an organization founded by Greens to give disadvantaged youth something to do over the summer, in terms of cleaning up neighborhoods, making gardens, various green type activities.
Great.
And I believe it's still around.
And the other organization you mentioned that was in Europe, what was the name of that group? Or you talked about something from the 1700s?
Oh, the Committees of Correspondence.
Yes.
That's what the Greens in America were called when Greens first came to America. Some people down in Kansas organized that. And it was a way of sort of, at that point there weren't many Greens, and the internet wasn't around at that point either, so it was basically done by a round robin of letters and stuff. They would send letters back and forth to each other, so it was
They styled themselves after the older...
Yes.
Great, okay, thanks. I like to learn history where I can.
Okay.
Now, do you know about how many locals there are in Michigan?
The last number I heard, and this was about a month and a half ago, was, I believe, 23, which was a surprise to me, because the previous number I heard was 9. So
Gee,
it's probably up to 30 now.
Okay. And you're down to 1 minute to a break, and want to wrap up. We'll take a break and come back. But Randym Jones, thank you for coming on in the Green today, and it's a pleasure to have you and to be able to talk about this. The Green platform is available on the internet for anyone at www.migreens.org. Yes. There's a link there to the platform. Yes. And Randym, thank you for putting in all the work on this that you have. It's really quite an amazing thing, and it's a work in progress, as politics always is, right?
That's right.
Okay, well, we'll be back in just a moment. Within the Green, I'm Matthew Abel, and our guest, Randym Jones.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
It takes so little to save our rivers and oceans for future generations. If we use less toxic household cleaners, we protect a little. Fewer lawn care chemicals, a little more. And recycling used motor oil gains us so much. In fact, there are many things we can do in our everyday lives that can help stop water pollution forever. Clean water, if we all do a little, we can do a lot. Brought to you by the Natural Resources Defense Council and the Ad Councils of the U.S. and Japan.
There have been rolling blackouts or brownouts out there.
Exactly.
And the Greens, it's really frustrating that it seems that we have the technology for clean, modern,
we certainly do.
Sustainable, productive energy. We have the technological base. We have the educated workforce, the folks who could make those items in Michigan. They do make some solar cells, I think, in Michigan. But,
in Troy, I believe. Yes.
Right. But we need a lot more of that, and I'm glad the Green platform specifically addresses that. But I think it's important. The Greens call for the decommissioning of all nuclear power plants. Now, I take it that's not tomorrow, but
Well,
sooner or later.
as soon as possible.
Probably not in our time. Analysts and predictive people have predicted in our grandchildren, our children will be quite aged in, grandchildren's time, and that's what we're fighting for.
I just want to point out the Greens don't want to
Yeah.
put everybody in the dark. We don't want to cut the lights here, right? But we want to develop an alternative.
Yes.
And it's frustrating that, you know, back in Jimmy Carter's day, what's that ancient history now, right? 20 years ago, more than
Some people, yeah.
that you know, President Carter was really a strong proponent of alternative energy. And was
Some people
trying to
don't
set
know
us on
that.
the
Some of the
course.
younger people, yeah.
But that didn't happen. And we call for the Michigan Low-Level Waste Advisory Board to ban the import of nuclear waste into Michigan,
Yeah.
because that's been happening, hasn't it? That nuclear
Where does it
waste
go?
is imported into Michigan
Well-
and stored
Is it near my house?
various locations.
Well, I know that right on the shores of Lake Michigan at the Big Rock nuclear power plant, they store, you know, nuclear waste in drums and stuff, and it's right by the water there. If it ever broke, yeah, it would just be a horrible, horrible disaster.
It's,
If that got, get in the water.
so not only are we
Exactly.
storing our own nuclear waste, but we're importing nuclear waste. It's really incredible. There's a lot that can be done.
Can it be discharged in outer space?
It
I'm just
really
kidding.
seems like, I'm getting philosophical here, but it really seems like it's up to the Greens. You know, the Democrats are not doing it, and the Republicans are not doing it. And
Because it's against big business. It's not something that the big business wants to deal with, the large corporations that are the major polluters. Some of it adhered, but you know, there needs to be more and more understanding that we are all interrelated with our environment, with every living thing. Like
that's true.
The web of
And-
life.
We just have been given a 2-minute sign, and on that
Okay.
interrelated note, while
Yeah,
we
that's
still
all
have a
of them.
chance, I want to make sure I get a chance to thank the crew here tonight. Well, Randym Jones, our guest. Eric Beauregard, who's the producer in the booth. I guess he's a technical director today, producer and technical director. And on camera, stage director Leroy Johnson. Thanks, Leroy. And Mike Brennan, and Sandy Dupuy, and Russ Hickson. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, everyone. I should be buying that old greenhouse soon. If all goes well, I'm looking at a 18th century home in Howell. Lord willing, back don't break and creek don't rise, you know, and the mortgage comes through. We'll be in there soon, by June, that's
great.
hopefully. And we are going to put solar panels on the roof, and we're going to film that for everybody to be able to view that
Great.
normally
Well,
views
that'll be great.
us.
Maybe we can get a
And-
remote shoot out there.
Exactly.
We can do a show
And,
at Maryland's new
exactly.
residence.
That would be interesting.
That'd be really neat.
Yeah.
And Randym, thanks so much for coming on the show
Sure
today
thing.
and making a record for history. And
Yeah, thank
it's been
you.
really interesting. And maybe in a few years we'll have you back, or a few months, depending on what's going on, and see how things have changed and grown with the Green Party.
I'm sure they'll be growing.
Yes, it's
Yes,
really going to be
leaps and
exciting to
bounds.
watch.
Indeed.
Again, I'm Matthew Abel here with Marilyn McDermott, our special guest Randym Jones. You're watching In the Green